Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 76 of the Drew Pavlis Show. Thanks for tuning in. Give me a little bit of time for some people to join. I'm going to be covering the news today. Really big news in Australian foreign policy. I've been continually posting against Zoran. There's so much stuff to cover. And I am still continuing with the Drew Pavlis Show. We're on the way to 100 episodes. So we'll cover all the news of the day. We'll cover all the news of the day. Drew, I'm your strongest soldier. Thank you. And Easy Money says hello. Hello, Easy Money. How you going? I'll put the comments on the screen. Can you guys see that? Are the comments showing up on the stream? Please let me know. Drew, your Ukraine profile pic on Twitter is good, but the old one had more aura. Do you think I should change it? Which one are you talking about? The one with like the green background? Maybe I should change it. Good idea. Thank you. I appreciate it. Maybe I'll change it. Hang on. Let me see if it's live. We're live on Twitter. I'll share out the link. How's audio? How's everything going? All right, guys. There's so much to cover. Most racist countries, but your hood win again. That's very funny. So this is a good one. Rashid Al-Haddad, Hassan's friend, is threatening to kill Ethan Klein because Ethan Klein is Jewish. Literally the Houthi, Hassan's Houthi terrorist pet is threatening Can we get a fucking drone strike? Literally drone strike him. Who even fucking cares at this point? Hassan's Houthi terrorist pet is threatening to murder an American citizen because he is Jewish. Can we get a drone strike on him? Just get it done. Get it done. Hang on, I need to repost to spell it better. Hang on 1 second. Sorry. I missed the H. Can you imagine how funny it would be? Just take him out. Who cares? Who even fucking cares at this point? Literally, who fucking cares? Hassan's Houthi terrorist pet is threatening to murder an American citizen because he's Jewish. Trump, can we get a drone strike on him? Just drone strike him. This is straight terrorist threat against an American. And who even fucking cares? Who would cry? I'm not crying. Literally, who would be sad? If literally the Houthi terrorist guy got drone striked, who would even care? So I think it'd be funny. So I actually hope that happens. This is actually horrific. There's a picture of child rapist Stephen Ireland volunteering to teach how to work on radio shows at a school with a child in fetish gear. Literally, Britain needs a Lee Kuan Yew. Britain needs a Lee Kuan Yew massively. Get it done. We need a Lee Kuan Yew and get these people should be in prison. These people should be in prison. What else is happening today? There was a rally for the grooming gangs in Britain. Innocent men are victims too. Lack of investigations by the police. Amazing stuff. Racist system. Literally deport every single person at this rally. Just deport him. Drew, I don't want to. Pickles LeBlanc is crying because he wants to pretend that bad things don't exist in the world because it makes the left look bad. So Pickles LeBlanc is like a leftist, and he's like upset that like there are people who are supporting like the grooming gangs because that looks bad for the left. Sorry, it's happening in real life. You have to. Oh yeah, and by the way, a drone strike in GTA. I'm gonna say. Yeah. Oh, it's not good. It's not good right now, is it? It's not good. What else? This is a good one. Nearly half of America's murderers get away with it. Most crimes go unsolved, emboldening criminals and potentially leading to more violence. That's terrible. I agree with this guy. I'm going to follow him. I'm beginning to think the Iraq War has done more material damage to the American psyche than even Vietnam. It turned a generation of conservatives into medieval-brained isolationists, a generation of liberals into Islamophiles, and a generation of progressives into both. Yeah, actually the most disastrous ever. Yeah, Bob Carr has gone full pro-China. So we're going to cover that today in the show. Albanese gave a speech where he sort of like had these subtle jabs at America, and he's following that up with a trip directly to China. So that's the first thing he's doing. He's going straight to China. How good is this? Shia Islamist rally beneath pride flags in London. Aesthetic perfection. It's awesome. It's actually so good. How good does this look? I love the London pride flags with the triangle, and then you've got the Shia Islamist rally. It's Hussein's legacy lives on. Amazing. Yeah, Zoran. No, we want to defund the police. It's good. It's good when they let everyone know what they believe in. No, we want to defund the police. No, we want to defund the police. Genius. Very smart. This is a great tweet by Mimic Sisyphus. There are those who side against Israel because they hate the Jews. They're a small minority. There are those who are Islamists, which kind of just comes with being an Islamist. But for the vast majority of the people in the West who support it, free Palestine just means fuck you, dad. Actually, very factually true. Fuck the West. Fuck dad. Fuck the rules dad gave me. Fuck God for existence being. That's actually their mindset. It's true. This is true, actually. This is a good one. Zoran shared a pro-Assad article in 2013 that denied his use of chemical weapons in Syria. That's fucking beautiful. It's almost criminal level negligence on the part of Zoran's opponents that they failed to hire a 20-something-year-old to shift through his old tweets for $30 an hour while you now do it for free. Imagine how different the race would be now. Literally fact check true. I'm doing this for free. Look at this shit. He's literally defending fucking Assad and the chemical weapons attacks. It's fucking heinous. Why is it that people always use the US as the point of reference of rationality? Good question, Zoran. Zoran was in Egypt during the uprising against the Muslim Brotherhood, and he was pretty clearly pro-Muslim Brotherhood. So, yeah, Aki, you'd really rather SAF. So he's talking about the Egyptian military be in, even when you post about circular nature of Egyptians' recent history. Yeah, so he was literally defending the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood. Search up Zoran on Drew's Twitter and take a shot for every tweet. Fact check true. This is free speech. Australian mind cannot comprehend it. Yeah, dude, but people don't like it. So he's going to lose the election. He's going to lose the election. Watch it. He was upset about Ataturk-style secularism. Zoran was very concerned that the Boston Marathon bomber was not told about his right to remain silent. Oh no, the Miranda rights of the fucking Boston Marathon bomber who killed all these people. So sad, man. So sad. He was literally complaining that the police didn't tell the Boston Marathon guy that he had the right to remain silent. And he's like literally the Boston Marathon guy. Like, holy fuck, man. Zoran would have been 20-something here, though. He's literally the same age as me. No, he probably might not be as unhinged as now, at least smart enough not to fully advocate for this shit now. But, dude, he's literally this. He was the same age as me when he was posting this shit. I think this is a good point. I had this good point about the Christopher Columbus statue. So, take it down. He says he's got... So, Zoran posted this in June 2020. He was giving the ups to... doing the middle finger to a statue of Christopher Columbus. Take it down. And I said, Zoran only pisses on the Christopher Columbus statue because it's a statue linked to white migrants. Was Christopher Columbus a good guy? Personally, I don't even care. I'm more interested in what the myth means to wider society. The Columbus myth is basically that Italians helped found America. That's why the statues went up. They were the result of a successful lobbying effort by Italian Americans. Yes, of course, it's a myth. It's widely known that Christopher Columbus insisted to the day that he died that he had really found India. So, of course, the historical picture is more complicated. But the reason Italian Americans put up Columbus statues was because they wanted to be included in the American national mythos. It's really ultimately a wholesome thing, just saying, hey, Italians were always part of this country. Nobody putting up the statue was thinking about the worst aspects of American history when they put it up. Nobody put up the statue thinking, yes, finally we have a statue to celebrate murdering natives. Nobody thought that. It was just a bunch of Italian Americans saying, please include us in the American national project. And Zoran pisses on it for that specific reason. Every nation relies on shared stories to bind disparate peoples together. So when you attempt to take a sledgehammer to these stories day after day after day, it is ultimately an attempt to try undermine and disintegrate the country as a coherent political entity. It's like screaming at kids that Santa doesn't exist. Okay, cool. We all know that, but you're just being an absolutely miserable prick. That was one of my best posts. That was one of my best posts. Drew, you've allowed getting beaten up at one rally in 2018 to define your whole personality. I think this is the end of the road for your dogs feel that negative energy. Pickles is just like, he's really upset that like I'm not promoting fucking like mentally ill communism. Sorry, dude, I'm not a communist, okay? Carr was director of the Australia-China Relations Institute, which receives donations from Chinese businessmen. He is compromised. Yes, absolutely true. He was receiving donations from people like Huang Xiaomo, one of the most disturbing pro-CCP figures in Australian public life. You're promoting mentally ill liberalism. No, I'm literally not. Relax. This is so funny. Bruno Massais, he's such a clown. Quite repulsive how American political culture can only understand the world in terms of skin color. Thus, Mamdani cannot be African because he is not black. In reality, of course, Africa is profoundly multicultural, multiracial. That tweet could literally be used to say that Elon Musk is African. And we all know that Elon Musk is not African. So it's just ridiculous. How good's this? Fuck the University of Chicago, but it's my best shot at power. And it's an Arab Islamist academic at the University of Chicago. Oh yeah, Zoran literally saying each according to their need, each according to their ability, which is like literally foundational communist idea. Shagzadeh did so well here. You've said stupid things here before, so I'm not surprised, but it's simple. African American, really specific, refers specifically to descendants of slavery in America. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. This is a funny post. Do you think Joe is a Yimby, guys? If you're here and you're from Brisbane, tell me, do you think Sir Joe Bjelke-Petersen was a Yimby? That was just a post to annoy everyone. Here's a comment I got today. It is not your country, you filthy despicable, you dumb motherfucker, white trash. It does belong to downtrodden, poor Aboriginal, and I believe you yourself an infiltrated Jew. So insert that to your little head. The Jew is not someone who can reconcile. Everyone should be destroyed. Unhinged. This is a great tweet. This was a very good point I raised. According to Zoran's father, immigrants are prepared to accept the arrangements of the state to which they move, including its borders, whereas settlers aim to create their own distinct new political community. Zoran doesn't believe in the borders of the United States. He thinks that the US shouldn't exist because it is a colonial entity settled by Europeans. Does that make him a settler? That's actually a good question. Literally a good question. Oh, this one is so good, guys. This is Australia's Conservative Party, conservative in air quotes, the Australian right-wing party. And she's gone to a listening session with Chinese Australian community leaders, apologizing for being racist, promising to be more supportive of the Australia-China relationship in the future. Like, why do we even have a fucking country at this point? Why do we even have conservatives in this country? It's over, if that's it. Like who appointed the Chinese community leaders that they're going to be meeting with?
That in mind, today's listening exercise to members of the Chinese communities is very much part of exercise to members of the Chinese communities is very much part of that. And what we were all able to emphasize is that it's just the beginning of an ongoing dialogue. I want to say, as I said in the room just now, how much we value our Chinese communities in this country. With that in mind, Julian, Lisa and I will be travelling tomorrow to the East Melbourne Synagogue with other Victorian colleagues to meet the Jewish community there and to hear directly from them about the awful, hideous events over the week.
I just don't know. I mean, when it comes to this China thing, who has appointed these Chinese Australian community leaders? Do we really need to have listening sessions saying, sorry, we're also racist? I don't know. Yeah, Arab American academic declares that she hates the University of Chicago and despises it as a colonial institution, but it's where we can get power. And I just simply ask this, do these people understand that they're saying these things in public and we can see them?
Fuck the University of Chicago. It's evil. Like, you know, it's a colonial landlord. Like, why would I put any of my political energy into this space? And I kind of had a little bit of disdain for like people who spent a lot of time doing that. And the genocide really,
I've got a comment here. Dude has Christian levels of mental resilience and well-off parents, so he'll never stop. What's Pickles LeBlanc talking about?
really collapsed that and made me realize that.
No, she's not going to get fired for this because, like, all Western institutions are addicted to self-flagellation and whipping us.
Two things. One is that, well, my students needed me. So it was like, oh, I have to organize here to take care of my students who I do care about. But I also realized, and I think this is a painful lesson that a lot of us in the Palestine Solidarity Movement have been learning, is that we don't have power. We can shift the moral authority all we want, and we've won the moral question. Like that was the imperative that we've had. Done.
In 76 episodes, I went from respecting Drew to being profoundly disappointed in him. Listen, I'm not going back to the left, Pickles LeBlanc, so get it through your head. I'm sorry. I've got my own views. I've got my own thinking. I don't like people like this who want to destroy America.
Done. Check. Like, put Palestine in the national consciousness. We did it. Make people sympathetic to Palestine, teach the history. We did it. Like, now you have white boys on the north side of Chicago being like, hey man, free Palestine. I'm like, oh, okay, now did not see it coming. Glad it's here. But what we don't have is power. And I think for me, the question of base building is about, I think the question that I'm asking myself and I'm asking you to ask yourself is, where can I actually build power? Turns out I work at one of the biggest employers in the city of Chicago. I work at a place that is a landlord, a healthcare provider, a police force. Fuck that shit, but they are.
Yeah,
right?
How dare they have a fucking campus security force? Oh, no.
A place where I have access to thousands of people that I could potentially organize. And you know what? It's not fun. Organizing academics. Next time you're in your organizing meeting being frustrated, please think of me. Please think about me trying to organize like academics. Like, it's brutal. I never saw this coming. However, but I'm just like, actually, this is where I need to build power, right? Like, this is my best possible structural leverage. And so I do one-on-ones with my liberal colleagues who are like, well, I don't know, but I just think we should live the life of the mind here in Hyde Park. Where we go. And it's like, yeah, I hear you totally. Yeah.
Why is she wearing a mask? Because they're all still mentally ill about COVID, like 6 years later. Great post by Shark Zadeh. America's the only country where a foreigner can insult the national symbolism mythos without backlash and even be praised by the locals. Northwestern Europeans are the most demoralized people. They hate their history, their forefathers, even their very existence. Yes, this is the thing I hate. It's just the self-hatred. And this is what I don't understand about Pickles LeBlanc. Do you not understand that self-hatred is such an ugly thing? And it's so disgusting and gross to just obsessively hate yourself. They hate the history of their forefathers and even their very existence. If you hate Christopher Columbus, you're sad that America exists? I don't know. Columbus is an ancient kafir, most likely burning in hell. Why do I care if Zoran flipped him off? That's funny. Another good one by Shagzadeh here. I feel like I am in La La Land. The same people who made Black American issues a countrywide discussion for 10 years are telling me that Zoran is African American and allowed to benefit from affirmative action. Are you seriously telling me that affirmative action is here to benefit African immigrants who are mostly well off? What a joke. Yeah, it's really ridiculous, isn't it? It literally is really ridiculous. I said that the difference between me and Ian Miles Chong is my brother literally lives in New York City. So I actually have family members living in New York City. So I can actually talk about this. When we have Shagzadeh on, I hope I can have Shagzadeh on soon. We kind of made up after the Iran crisis. So funny. Jeremy Corbyn trying to create this new party with this Zara Sultana girl. Just literally the anti-Britain party. The hate white people, love communism party. Just disgusting. And Elon starting his own party as well is so stupid. Yeah, literally no one even wants it at all. Literally, the American party, it's so hard to see them doing anything, hey? It's so hard to see them breaking off any MAGA votes at all. Who did your brother vote for? My brother's not an American citizen. Oh, Star's going on and on about this thing. Oh no. Oh God. Oh no. Yeah, this is my take as well. I was not convinced it was problematic when I first saw the video, but Mamdani absolutely should have been aware of how it looks to the average Westerner. I suspect if Islamophobia was at stake, he would not have taken it seriously. Yeah, exactly. That's it. Drew, what do you think of the H-1B visa issue? I just think it shouldn't be at a level that displaces American workers. I think that's a fair thing to say. Oh yeah, Zoran's father, Mahmoud Mamdani, helped create a North Korea Friendship Society as an anti-government front group in Uganda. The group maintained embassy ties with North Koreans and received Juche literature. Holy shit. Guns, guerrillas, and the great leader, Benjamin R. Young. One of the ways in which anti-government forces organized and recruited Uganda youth was through the Uganda-North Korea Friendship Society. Mahmoud Mamdani, a former anti-government dissident in Uganda and a current professor of African Studies at Columbia University, had helped to found the Friendship Society in 1981 as one of the few legal ways to reach out to young people in an increasingly oppressive and difficult environment. In an interview, Mamdani said this society had roughly 50 chapters of varying strength from 10 to 50 members, but members had very little idea of North Korea at the time, and most of the society's discussions revolved around the situation in Uganda, not Korea. Mamdani said there were embassy-level interactions with the North Koreans limited to the provision of literature. The North Koreans made Juche literature available to the society. The North Koreans had no knowledge that their friendship society was being used as a space of resistance against the Obote government, which they supported with arms and military training assistance. Mamdani explains North Koreans were woefully ignorant of the domestic situation in Uganda. They also had very little idea of the actual work of the society since it happened in individual chapters throughout the country. Mamdani stated North Korea did not support any kind of struggle against Obote. This support was limited to a general expression of anti-imperialism. There's no question of training or arms. This was a group limited to study and economic activity. Joe Biden fans asked me, who would you like to lead the Dems in 2028? I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know. We have to have the primary. You have to have the primary to work that out and let people put their views out there into the world. Whoever governs Britain and Australia must have balsa wood in them, or just give it up. It's a game of cards. That's the iteration of Lee Kuan Yew's famous man of iron speech when it comes to Australia. Drew, does the TTS work? I haven't used it yet. I'll try use it tomorrow. Listen, now I think now's the good time to start talking about Albanese and China. I think this is an important thing to talk about on the show. Australia's future foreign policy direction. Are we going in a more pro-China direction?
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is preparing to travel to China later this week to meet President.
So earlier this week, Anthony Albanese, he released a speech that was essentially kind of subtly calling out America, sort of subtly saying that Australia will have an independent path. And then he's going straight to China from that speech, which is really disturbing, to be honest, to go straight to China from that speech. So
the Perth home of John Curtin, National Trust listed today and in July 1945.
At the request of Mrs. Curtin, the cortege passes by the home he loved in Cottesloe.
John Curtin's death 80 years ago today, in the weeks before Japan's surrender.
He was our greatest Prime Minister.
Labor's wartime hero,
declaring the existence of a state of war with Japan.
He famously turned to America to help.
Yeah, but Pickles LeBlanc, I don't want them to play both sides in the Cold War. I want them to take the pro-America side because I'm against communism. So
blunt the threat of an invasion.
With the aid of gallant allies.
Tonight, our 14th Prime Minister is central to a speech from our 31st. Albanese arguing Curtin taught us to think and act for ourselves, shape our own future. The PM expected to acknowledge the US alliance as our most important defence and security partnership. But we do not seek our inspiration overseas, we find it right.
We do not seek our inspiration overseas, we find it right here.
Anthony Albanese talking up less reliance on the United States, right as he struggles to deal with a...
So Albanese is talking up less reliance on America, and in the same week he goes to China to visit Xi Jinping.
Shopping list of grievances between Washington...
Easy Money says, Drew, no one knows when Trump is going to backstab Australia. He's fully schizo. It's hard. Trump fucks us over massively. I understand that.
Washington and Canberra.
I'm pro-America. I'm against Trump.
But so far, can't get the meeting he needs to resolve them with US President Donald Trump.
Well, I think Mr. Albanese has really mucked up the relationship with the United States.
Prime Minister Albanese will prepare this coming week for a trip to America's great...
Shush! Shush, doggies! Shh. Oh my God. Sorry, guys. I got the doggies.
Pacific rival, China. Tim Lester, 7 News.
Too happy when he's meeting Xi Jinping. Just way too happy when he's meeting Xi Jinping. Way too happy. Way too many smiles to be meeting a fucking evil dictator.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese.
Pickles LeBlanc, I don't know if you understand, but Xi Jinping's worse than Trump. He's actually a dictator for life.
Preparing to travel to China later this week to meet President Xi Jinping, where he's expected to be greeted with red carpet reception.
How can one be pro-America but anti the president of America? Because Trump is not the sole Trump is not the sole repository of all Americanism in history. America is 340 million people. It's not one person. Drew, what do you think is happening with AUKUS? We don't know. AUKUS might be over. We don't know. AUKUS is not going well right now.
Diplomatic visit comes amid fresh claims this morning that China is hoping to capitalise on our fraying relationship with the US, with trade and investment to be a heavy focus of the discussions between the two leaders in Beijing. For their take, let's bring in Social Services Minister Tanya Plibersek and Nationals MP here in the studio, Barnaby Joyce. Good morning to both of you. Barnaby, can this sort of take up some of the slack, do you think, relationship with China that the US is creating?
Well, the Prime Minister must have a hell of a hand of cards because he's really got the chips on the table on this one. This is very dangerous. We've got to understand that the United States is the cornerstone of our defence relationship. It's not going well. This is the 4th meeting that the Prime Minister's had with the leader of China, but this is a totalitarian regime. We've got to understand that.
It's true. He's met Xi Jinping 4 times, never met the elected president of Australia. Should China really be seen as a threat to Australia? It's probably impossible to invade Australia. Yeah, let's take chances with the totalitarian dictatorship that is currently undertaking the largest peacetime military buildup in all of human history. So the Chinese government right now is carrying out the largest military buildup in peacetime in human history. And let's all just all hope that it's for completely peaceful purposes.
And Mr. Trump has not had a meeting with the Prime Minister yet. And I'm truly concerned about that, and especially why they're doing a review on AUKUS. This is not good.
Shouldn't we make friends with China?
We should, but we should not do it at the expense of...
No, we shouldn't make friends with China. Straight up, we should not make friends with China. It's run by a totalitarian dictatorship, a communist party. I'm not pro-communist. I'm against communism. So we should not be friends with a government a country that is run by a communist party.
the United States of America. We've got to understand the realm we live in, and this realm of the Western Pacific. If things go pear-shaped for us, we're in trouble, real trouble, and we're supposed to be becoming as powerful. If we are going to have a defence policy that doesn't need the United States, we'll get ready to spend hundreds of billions of dollars on defence, because we are way, way, way behind where we need to be.
That is what a lot of defence experts are saying. Tanya, is the Prime Minister looking for a new bestie?
Full circle history. It's not that they want to necessarily militarily conquer Australia. It's more the greatest risk, I think, is Finlandization. That being essentially a situation whereby Australia has to cleave very close to Chinese foreign policy and essentially represses criticism of the Chinese government at home, represses dissidents, all these sorts of things in order to safeguard the relationship, and engages in massive amounts of self-censorship and massive amounts of censorship to safeguard the relationship with a repressive regime. That's my worst case scenario.
In China?
Well, your question started, Nat, with the assumption that there's a fraying relationship with the United States, and nothing could be further from the truth. The Prime Minister's spoken to the President on the phone. The Defence Minister's met his counterpart recently. The Foreign Affairs Minister has just been in the United States recently. Trade Minister's constantly talking to his counterpart in the US. We've got all sorts of high-level constantly going on with the United States, and that's as it should be. The United States absolutely is our foundational defence and security partner. The relationship is terrific. We also want to have a good trading relationship with...
Yeah, my worst case scenario is essentially that Australia becomes like a Warsaw Pact type satellite state. Not that we get physically invaded by China. My worst case scenario over the next 30, 40 years is that we basically become, like a satellite state.
China. Under the previous Morrison government, the trading relationship had smashed out agriculture.
Under Finlandization, I basically get forced into exile, and I'd probably have to leave to America. If Australia became a satellite state under Chinese government influence, I would not be safe living in Australia. I'd be forced into exile.
Cultural sector. We've restored $20 billion worth of trade with China. That's good for our farmers. It's certainly good for Barnaby's constituents. And I would have thought he would be welcoming the restoration of trade with the stabilisation of the relationship. As the Prime Minister has constantly said, we cooperate with China where we can, we disagree where we must, and that's worked out. That's worked out very well for Australia in recent years with the restoration of those billions of dollars of trade.
Oh yeah, criticise them where we can, disagree. Agree with them where we can, disagree where we must, and that essentially ends up just being you never criticise them ever.
Well, you don't have to throw trade out the door to maintain a defence relationship. Now, if you're saying we have a great relationship with a great relationship with our neighbour in the United States, it's just you've never been over for a cup of tea.
If Don Jr. offered Drew the chance to be military governor of Brisbane, he'd strongly consider, fuck off, dude. Just fuck off. You're being so annoying right now.
Invited you into the house for a cup of tea. You haven't met them. So you say, the best you've done is yelled over the fence to them. And this is not the sign of a good relationship. And if we can't extract a meeting between the Prime Minister of Australia and the President of the United States, we are on bad ground. Now, I like
Drew will lead the Australian partisans.
But he is not the ambassador for the United States. He's got to be moved to somewhere like the United Kingdom or France. Done is yelled over the fence to them. And this is not the sign of a good relationship. And if we can't extract a meeting between the Prime Minister of Australia and the President of the United States, we are on bad ground. Now, I like Kevin Rudd. He is a nice guy. But he is not the ambassador for the United States. He's got to be moved to somewhere like the United Kingdom or France, and we have got to really work on this relationship because it is tenuous, and that is dangerous, more dangerous for Australia than it is for the United States. Well, it's not nonsense, Tanya, because we just can't crack a meeting with him. We look like the odd ones out when we go to these meetings. He pushed off to the side. You don't get in the room. It's ridiculous.
Tanya, would you say that the Albanese relationship with Trump is exactly where you want it to be?
He's had multiple phone calls with the President.
Well, one was like, congratulations.
We were disappointed when the President needed to return quickly to Washington because the Middle East blew up. Anybody would understand. The President of the United States
wanted
to
be
back in Washington.
And the Prime Minister of India. He just didn't talk to us.
And there was 6 months in between, when he got in and then...
The Australian relationship with the United States is deep, long, abiding and stable. And I think it's actually really...
No, the real thing is the people who would be Vichy'ites are Keating and Carr. They would be the ones who want to become Vichy governors in the Chinese government-controlled satellite state of Australia.
No, it's not because the Prime Minister gave that really weird speech at the Curtin Institute where he basically started with an inference that we're going to go our own way. How on earth will that work? He gave the speech, Tanya, not me.
Yeah, Tanya, that was an interesting speech. It did feel like we were, heading in another direction. When you've got basically a conga line of defence experts lining up to say we need to be spending more on defence in this.
The decades and decades of America skepticism from Labour hardliners is impossible to escape. The occasional Washington sympathiser cannot overcome a policy stance that is America skeptic forever. This is a very grim and sad stance by Thirsty Whitehead. He may be correct. It's very sad.
His speech made the absolutely perfectly valid point that Australia and Australian Labor government will always put Australian interests first. I don't know why you think that is remarkable.
Because you're not putting us first.
I don't know why you think that's
remarkable. Because we just have been devoid of a relationship at the highest level. The Prime Minister and the President are not talking to one another in a face-to-face meeting. And if you're going to Australia first, you better get our defence relationship up to speed. Because the number one job is to protect the Australian people. It is not because I didn't give that crazy speech that the Prime Minister gave at the Curtin where he's sort of like, oh, well, we're going to go our own way. With whose army? We're way behind. We've got 6 submarines and at times none of them work. We've got 3 that they're basically in something like cruise from.
I mean, this is a good point. We literally have 6 submarines. Half of them don't work. Our defense spending is at 2%. We can't go independent of the American alliance. We've got 2% defense spending. If the reality is, if you want to go independent of the American alliance, you have to make defense spending 6-7% of GDP. The right-wing opposition party in Australia is very pro-America. There's only like 1 or 2 weirdo pro-Russia guys in it. The vast majority of them are just pretty much solid Atlanticists, I'd say. I'm writing a tweet about this. 1 second. I've just posted this. So this week, the Australian Prime Minister gave a major national speech insinuating that he wanted to make Australia more independent of America. He's following that speech with a trip to China to meet Xi Jinping. Without the US, there are only 2 paths. Israel 10% GDP spending on defense or full-blown Vichy-like submission to China. That's it. That's it. Yeah, this week, the Australian Prime Minister gave a major national speech insinuating that he wanted to make Australia more independent of America. He's following that speech with a trip to China to meet Xi Jinping. Without the US, there are only 2 paths. Spend 10% of GDP on defense like Israel or accept long-term Vichy-like submission to China.
Instead of waiting for us to come to government, I really could have done anything other than issue press releases.
Australia's ever been against ownership in comparative terms.
Singapore is the sort of government you wish to lead an English boarding school with F-35s. You're making that sound base, dude.
And that's why we are spending more than any government in Australian history. That's why we're $60 billion
Former chiefs of Army and Navy say we are in worse form than we were 20, 30 years ago. So that's who you've got to listen to. A former ASIO chief
started this project a decade ago. It would have been good if we'd started under the coalition government.
That's a point to do. Anyway, look, we've run out of time. Thank you very much. We've got to go. We'll see you next week, Isha.
This is a good comment by Big Thinker. It feels like we are basically like Eastern Europe in the early 1930s, stuck between the communist and the potential authoritarian fascist regime. Yeah, it's very scary, actually. Yeah, this is it. If you want to be neutral, you have to be heavily armed. You have to spend 10% of defense on GDP. You have to spend 10% of GDP on defense. Otherwise, you just get sucked into somebody else's sphere. Let's see some more news coverage of the China turn in Australia.
Digital technologies will form part of trade talks between the Prime Minister and China's President as Beijing looks to expand its relationship with Australia. Live now to Federal Politics reporter Amanda Kopp in Canberra. Amanda, this is an important trip for the PM.
It sure is, Jane. Anthony Albanese is gearing up to head to China at the end of this week. He'll be over there for almost a week, a long time when it comes to these sorts of international trips. And it really does show a stabilisation in the relationship with China. Which
Wait, hang on, a week in China?
Digital technologies will form part of trade talks between the Prime Minister and China's President as Beijing looks to expand
literally kill me, man.
its relationship with Australia. Live now to Federal Politics reporter Amanda Kopp in Canberra. Amanda, this is an important trip for the PM.
It sure is, Jane. Anthony Albanese is gearing up to head to China at the end of this week. He'll be over there for almost a week, a long time when it comes to these sorts of international trips. And it really does show a stabilisation in the relationship with China, which has only...
Wow, how beautiful. The country that literally created a foreign intelligence plot to kidnap me in Australia because I criticized them on Twitter. Yeah, let's put all our eggs in with that basket. Thanks, Albanese, for defending me as an Australian citizen. Really appreciate it.
Recently recovered from years of rocky relations on trade. On the cards this time around, potential deals on artificial intelligence and digital tech. Another thorny topic, though. Australia has previously run into issues with China on our positions on Chinese tech, banning TikTok on government phones and blocking Huawei from government communications contracts. So as always, with our biggest trading partner, an important but potentially fraught trip ahead for the PM, Jane.
Amanda, thank you.
Okay, in the meantime, Anna, the PM is visiting China.
I think we'll see you there today.
Okay, visiting China for the...
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Hang on, for the fourth meeting with old mate Xi Jinping. Is he doing his best to deliberately wind America up at the moment?
No, not at all. I think it's great that he's heading off to China. It's our largest trading partner, and we saw the impacts of the previous government where we saw cuts to our vital trade. I think you'll see a strengthening of the relationship. Trade is very important. It means jobs here in Australia, and I think he's taking a business delegation as well. So hopefully there'll be a lot of outcomes after this trip. And of course, he'll be seeing the US president later in the year as well. Okay. So he'll cover off both bases by the end of the year.
So according to the thing I think this morning, China want AI as part of the free trade deal. Does that raise anyone's alarm bells? Yours, Anna? Are you a little bit concerned about that in any way, shape, or form?
Oh, look, I think as long as it's measured, but of course AI is really important and we have got to get with the modern tech. China, I've been over there, visited electric car factories, solar panel factories. Their AI is incredible. They are state of the art and we've got to keep up. Australia has to be up there with the best. So hopefully this delegation over there will be able to take the best of the best and have joint partnerships here back in Australia.
Paul, what do you think? I mean,
more money to China, please, 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 please. Please make us a vassal state right away. Please, 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 Australia. Please, let's make us a Vichy satellite state right away. Please, right away, sir. Please, 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 make us a Vichy vassal state. Please. That's it. Fucking beautiful. Australia doesn't need entangling alliances with the West. We are a Western country. If you don't like that, leave Australia. Simple.
I'm the only one concerned.
No, I think what happens when there's a big charm offensive on by a foreign government like China, which has tried to stabilise the relationship with Australia after some years of turbulence, what happens, Carl, is that a lot is left unsaid. Everything bad is left unsaid. And what is left unsaid here is that Huawei was banned from Australia in 2017 by the Turnbull government for being involved in our 5G network. Government representatives are not allowed to have TikTok on their phone. They're not allowed to have deep.
So let's do a deal. Let's do a deal.
So there's huge risk here, and I think the Australian government will be treading very, very carefully without saying so publicly.
All right, we got to roll. Thank you so much.
But of course, yes.
Pickle says we are an Anglo-Asian country. Since when? Who came up with that idea? Who voted for it? We are a Western democratic country. Western democratic country. Long-term mentally ill thing from like Paul Keating is to keep on going like, we're an Asian country. We're an Asian country because we are located in Asia. And just like have contempt for like the sort of Western democratic institutions that built up over the decades in your country.
Honouring John Curtin, promoting Australia's independence from the United States. Anthony Albanese paid tribute to the wartime leader. Speaking on the 80th anniversary of his death, Mr Albanese believed Mr Curtin made tough calls by rejecting requests from US President Franklin Roosevelt and UK Prime Minister Winston Churchill in the interest of Australia.
Is the Australian youth as self-hating as the American and British youth? Yeah, it's exact same. It's exact same. We've got the exact same culture as American and Britain. So we've got the exact same level of self-hatred among white people in this country. And I can say that as somebody who's like sort of half white. I'm like in the in-between phase because I'm born because my family is Cypriot. So I can say this as a kind of outsider. White people in Australia hate themselves so much.
Of the Australian Imperial Force returning from the Middle East. Curtin wanted those troops for the defence of Australia. Churchill wanted them in Burma, and Roosevelt backed him. Barely 2 months.
Wait, what does he say? Hang on. What's this?
Prime Minister has delivered a speech honouring John Curtin, promoting Australia's independence from the United States. Anthony Albanese paid tribute to the wartime leader. Speaking on the 80th anniversary of his death, Mr Albanese believed Mr Curtin made tough calls by rejecting requests from US President Franklin Roosevelt and UK Prime Minister Winston Churchill in the interest of Australia.
2 divisions of the Australian Imperial Force returning from the Middle East. Curtin wanted those troops for the defence of Australia. Churchill wanted them in Burma and Roosevelt backed him. Barely 2 months after Curtin had said that Australia looked to America, America was telling us to listen to Britain. Some historians downplayed the military significance of that moment. They argue the threat of invasion was always exaggerated. But consider the counterfactual. If Churchill and FDR had got their way, Australian forces would have arrived in Burma barely a week before it fell to the Japanese. Hundreds, if not thousands, of Australians would have been killed or taken prisoner. It would have been a disaster every bit as crushing to national morale as the fall of Singapore was.
There are concerns the speech may have drawn the ire of the US during a time where the relationship between the two nations appear to be slightly strained. The opposition believes the Prime Minister hasn't done enough to strengthen ties.
I think Mr Albanese has really mucked up the relationship with the United States. The fact that before the election he didn't go himself and argue the position of Australia in relation to tariffs. The fact that there is now an inquiry going on into AUKUS, which is our most important security measure that we've been taking in recent years. The fact that he can't get a meeting with President Trump does not provide an excuse for a change of policy from the government.
It's concerning, very concerning.
Joining me now is the Australian's foreign editor, Greg Sheridan. Greg, good to see you. You wrote a great piece in The Australian today asking, is Anthony Albanese actually trying intentionally, for reasons best known to himself, to diminish, if not undermine, the US-Australia alliance? So, Greg, I'm going to ask you the question. Is Anthony Albanese actually trying, for reasons best known?
As Thirsty Whitehead, this is true. He says, Australia's copying the Chamberlain-Cuck approach. Maybe if we just submit to China, life will be good and we can avoid catastrophe. That's how they think about it.
To himself to diminish, if not undermine, the US-Australia alliance.
Well, great to be with you, Erica. Look, the answer is I don't know. I don't know. I've always really liked Albo personally. He'll hate to hear me say that because I've been so critical of him lately. But he comes from the left. He worked for Tommy Wren, who was a, vehemently anti-American.
Pickle says Trump has undermined the alliance. I hate Trump. As you know, I hate Trump. But to just destroy the American alliance because we don't like the guy that they elected, that's ridiculous.
Leftist, and there's no evidence that Albanese ever gave national security a minute's thought before he became leader of the party. And I think now we look back on the hawkish things he said as opposition leader and in his first year in government, and the suspicion grows that those were the things he felt he had to say politically. He didn't really believe them. This was a bizarre speech. I mean, Curtin's whole wartime prime ministership was about keeping Britain and America both connected to Australia and in defence of Australia. And far from declaring any independence from America, Curtin put the whole of the Australian Defence Force under the command of General Douglas MacArthur. MacArthur was like a wartime overlord in Australia, and that was a smart policy for Curtin. Curtin was not some kumbaya Asianist. Curtin was, the World War II equivalent of Vladimir Zelensky saying, please help, our country is in terrible trouble. And the people who came to help were the Americans. We're independent. We remain independent because of the American naval battles of Coral Sea and Midway. Our men fought heroically in Papua New Guinea as well. But Albanese has presented the absolute stark opposite of what Curtin really was. It's a ridiculous speech historically.
China never hurt or attacked Australia. Oh yeah, just a couple dozens of billions of dollars worth of trade sanctions against Australia. Attempts to censor Australia, attempts to pressure Australia to shut down the independent think tanks and journalists to stop them criticizing the Chinese government. Also attempts to literally kidnap critics of the Chinese government inside Australia, which is what happened to fucking me.
Says Curtin founded the American alliance. That's untrue. The Americans wouldn't have an alliance with Australia in the late 1940s, partly because they didn't trust Doc Evatt, who was part of the Labor government. And the Menzies government founded the alliance in 1951. But the bigger question is, why did Albanese make such a bizarre speech? Is he trying to provoke the Americans into killing off AUKUS? Therefore, he won't have to spend any money on the nuclear submarines. He still won't increase the defence budget, I bet. And he can sort of run that as standing up to Trump's bullying. Albanese, even at the level of politics, should be very careful about this, though. Trump is very unpopular, but the American alliance is very popular.
Yeah, and I think it would be naive of us to think that we need to be independent from the United States right now. And I've got to say, Greg, I found the speech more favourable to China than the US. He said, quote, Labor was patiently and deliberately working to stabilise our relationship with China. We know that the Prime Minister is about to go to Beijing. He's had 4 meetings with China, none with Trump. Why is Anthony Albanese so at ease with China?
Well, because they flatter him, and because I don't think he's ever accepted the national security view of China. In private conversation, he always regarded, before he became leader, he always regarded China as extremely benign and thought the China threat stuff was wildly exaggerated. Now, you think a guy who sits around the National Security Committee of Cabinet would grow up and change his view. I mean, Malcolm Turnbull had a benign view of China, but once he became Prime Minister and saw all the intelligence and everything, he became very, very tough-minded indeed, and outlines it all in his memoir. But also this idea of becoming independent of America. What does this even mean? We rely 100% on American technical intelligence, for example, to show us what ships and planes are moving in our own region. This Labor government, Albanese's government, abolished the program to have low Earth orbit satellites for civilian use, but which would have also had military use, and abolished the program to have military satellites for secure communication. So it's determined we're not going to have any capability of our own. So we are 100% dependent on the Americans. Now, if you were really claiming you were going to be somehow or other more independent of the Americans, well, you'd have to triple or quadruple or quintuple the defence effort. You'd have to have all your own satellites and make your own missiles and all the rest. Well, Albanese won't spend $1 on defence. We have
That's
a ridiculously
if you want to have
defence budget.
This is the thing. If you want to be completely independent of America, fair enough. Then you have to go the full-blown gawless 10% of GDP spending on defence. That's what you have to do. Now, tell me, Max. I've got Max Super in the chat saying, attacking the American alliance. Okay, it's okay. If you don't like the American alliance, that's fine. But will you accept that we're going to have to spend about 5-6% of the GDP on defense? Are you going to increase it? Are you going to triple defense spending? Are you going to introduce a national draft and have youth have national service for young people? That's what you would need, unfortunately. That's why we need the American alliance, because the Australian people would not tolerate the level of sacrifice that would be required to put Australia on its own independent military footing.
So what is he up to? This is just, I think, crass politics and a wildly unrealistic view of a benign China, and thinking that it's smart to be at war with Trump, or not, if not at war with Trump, distant from Trump. It's not even clear that he can't get an interview with Trump. I don't think he's willing to go to Washington to meet Trump in the Oval Office, because he doesn't want Trump to commit him to defence spending or to some formulation on China. This is an abdication of leadership, and Curtin would be ashamed of Albanese.
Yeah, good. That's a really, really good point. And I also just think he's so scared. He's so scared of Donald Trump. He's scared of what might happen, even though so many world leaders have already been there. Greg Sheridan, we've got to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining me on the show this evening. Appreciate it.
Last month, the US announced it was conducting a review of its AUKUS security pact with the UK.
Why Australia is falling out with the US?
Australia, with some US defense officials apparently arguing that AUKUS is inconsistent with Trump's America First policy, and that the US shouldn't supply submarines to Australia in case the US needs them for a conflict in Taiwan. Unsurprisingly, this has raised eyebrows in Australia and put yet more strain on the long-standing US-Australia alliance, which was already fraying. So in this video, we're going to explain why AUKUS is in jeopardy and what all of this means for US-Australia relations. We're getting ever closer to 1 million subscribers, and 68% of you aren't even subscribed yet. So lend us a hand and subscribe today. First, let's recap the 2025 Australian election. Until just a couple of months before the election in May, polls suggested that the Conservative Liberal National Coalition, led by Peter Dutton, would oust the incumbent Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's Labour Party. But as the election approached, Labour surged in support and secured a landslide victory, winning 94 out of the 150 seats in the House of Representatives. During the campaign, Albanese was more popular than Dutton, who was hurt by his proximity to US President Donald Trump. Dutton said in February that Trump was a big thinker and praised his art of the deal, and his campaign also had some Trump-esque policies, including huge cuts to Australia's public service, a Doge-style government efficiency unit, and a referendum on deporting criminals with dual citizenship. However, the Trump administration was unpopular with the Australian public, with a YouGov poll in April finding that 66% of respondents thought that Australia needs to develop more independence from the US on defense and national security, compared to just 39% in June of 2024. And more than 70% of respondents thought that Trump's policies would make Australia worse off. For context, earlier that month, Trump had announced his Liberation Day tariffs, including a 10% tariff on Australian goods. Now, Albanese and Trump were obviously never going to be best buds, but relations have gotten off to a rockier start than most imagined. Broadly speaking, there are two issues straining the US-Australia relationship: trade and defense. On trade, you might expect Trump to be relatively friendly to Australia, given that it's one of few countries that the US actually runs a trade surplus with. This is why Australia was only threatened with the basic 10% tariff on Liberation Day, but this didn't go down well with Albanese, who since demanded zero tariffs. Trade relations have also been complicated by Australia's economic relationship with China, which has long been Australia's largest trading partner. The US is pushing for Australia to reduce its trade with China, which Australia doesn't want to do. And Australia is also worried that US tariffs on China could undermine the Chinese economy, reducing demands for Australian exports. While on defense, the US has called for Australia to increase its defense spending from its current levels of about 2% of GDP to 3.5% of GDP as soon as possible. But under its current budget profile, Australia plans to increase its defense spending only modestly in the short term, to just 2.25% of GDP in 2028-29, rather than the more dramatic commitments made by countries like Germany, France, or the UK. One reason for this is that there just isn't much public support for increasing defense spending in Australia. An April 2025 survey by the University of Sydney found that only a third of Australians support increasing it, suggesting the majority feel that the current level of spending is either appropriate or too high. And this sort of makes sense. In Europe, much of the public enthusiasm for increased defense spending is motivated by anxieties about Russia, but Australia doesn't have such an acute security threat on its doorstep. Furthermore, Albanese argued that it's up to Australia to decide its defense budget, that arbitrary GDP limits are unhelpful, and that defense needs should be established first and funding allocated afterwards, rather than the other way round. However, this week Australia's Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, hinted that the US may have cooled off on its demand for Australia to increase its defense spending, at least for now. However, the other defense-related issue in this relationship is AUKUS. In June, the US announced that it was conducting a 30-day review of the Biden-era AUKUS Security Pact, signed in 2021 between the US, UK, and Australia. Under the pact, Australia pays huge subsidies to both the US and UK's industrial bases to acquire between 3 and 5 US-built nuclear-powered attack submarines. This would massively upgrade Australia's military capabilities, as the US submarines are more advanced than Australia's diesel engine fleet, and would allow Australia to carry out long-range strikes against enemies. Now, even before the Trump administration was explicitly flirting with ditching the pact, there were anxieties in Australia that the US might not actually deliver the submarines on time. US shipbuilding is currently lagging behind schedule due to high costs and slow deliveries, as the US is struggling to meet its own targets. This is the main reason that Trump's Undersecretary of Defense, Elbridge Colby, who's leading the AUKUS review, is apparently skeptical of the pact's benefits for the US, and is wary of...
By the way, guys, leave a like on the stream. It helps us reach more people. Leave a like on the stream. We've got 25, 26 people watching live. If you can leave a like, it will help a lot. Please leave a like on the stream.
Selling nuclear submarines in case the US needs them in a potential conflict over Taiwan. This AUKUS debacle has also restarted a wider debate in Australia about the country's dependence on the US. Former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull claims that Australia is being mugged over its billion-dollar payments for US submarines that may never arrive, with Australia forecast to spend up to $360...
If Drew was alive in the Cold War, he would have gone crazy. Good comment by Andrew Landy here. I was at the function. To be honest, I didn't detect any repudiation of the alliance in the remarks. It was more of a repetition of the position on tariffs in defense of the pharmaceutical benefit scheme, etc. Interesting. Drew's continued genocide in speeding up YouTube videos to sound like they are greyhound races cannot be tolerated.
$8 billion in total on AUKUS between now and the mid-2050s.
It's my ADHD. I try to get as much information as possible in as little amount of time.
Self-reliant defense strategy. Albanese's government does appear to be making moves here, announcing last month that Australia would start talks on a defense and security pact.
All those watching are complicit in this audio genocide. It's good comment by Landy.
With the EU, following the EU's recent deals with Canada and the UK. So where next for US-Australia relations? Well, it's hard to imagine much improvement, especially if the US withdraws from AUKUS. Neither Trump nor Albanese has really invested much effort into mending ties. Albanese decided to miss this year's NATO summit, and Trump skipped a meeting with Albanese at the G7 meeting last month, where he left early to deal with the Iran-Israel war, which means that the two leaders still haven't met. Perhaps there could be some respite if the two sides agree on a trade deal before Trump's looming...
That's pretty bad. 6 months. It still haven't met. Please leave a like on the video, guys. Leave a like on the video. It helps us reach more people.
July 9th deadline. But this could be difficult if the Trump administration pushes Australia to reduce its trade with China, given that this has been the backbone of Australia's economic strength in recent decades. All of this plays into a broader feeling of chaos in the world at the moment. Whether it's wars, economics, or geopolitics, it feels like things are increasingly uncertain. And who's at the middle of all of that? Well, the United States. At one time, the US seemed to be a steady, stabilizing force in global politics, but it seems that those days are over, with American influence, popularity, and dominance on decline. So in the next issue of our magazine, Too Long, we're discussing this shift and the potential that we're currently observing the end of the American order. In that section of the magazine, we unpack everything from the collapse of...
Interesting. Let's go through the Australians article about what has happened. Joe Kelly, why Albanese's Australian Way speech will concern Washington. And Albanese has given a speech that will heighten fears of a growing strategic and political disconnect between Washington and Australia. The Prime Minister used the John Curtin oration in Sydney on Saturday night to set out what he dubbed the Australian Way under Labor. This is partly a response to the America First agenda being championed by Trump. Drawing on Curtin's wartime experience in resisting pressure from Winston Churchill and Franklin D. Roosevelt to divert Australian troops to Burma following the fall of Singapore, Albanese made clear the US alliance was not the extent of Australia's defence and foreign policy. Land use says this: AUKUS's demise is much exaggerated, won't happen. It's not just about subs, it's about interoperability among the naval forces. Jeez, mate, your information diet is very right-wing. Are you still liberal or is that gone right? Fucking get a grip, Pickles LeBlanc. Like, the Australian is like the main national broadsheet in Australia. Just reading the Australian doesn't make you fucking right-wing. Literally get a grip. Quote, our alliance with the US ought to be remembered as a product of Curtin's leadership in defense and foreign policy, not the extent of it, he said. Curtin's famous statement that Australia looked to America was much more than the idea of trading one strategic guarantor for another. It was a recognition that Australia's fate would be decided in our region. That's cope. That's massive cope. Curtin's famous statement was like, we look to America free of all burdens and previous ties to Britain. And Albanese is such a cope. He's like, oh no, that was actually about an assertion of Australia's place in the Asia Pacific. What the fuck? Drew must read Green Left Weekly to get true insight. Global Times also highly recommended. Yes, so true. This will be seen as a rhetorical assertion of greater Australian independence on the world stage at a time of growing differences and strain in Canberra's relations with Washington under Trump. The address will have been closely watched in Washington, with insiders already suggesting it is being viewed negatively. They say Albanese is not taking the obvious step to embrace greater independence by lifting defense spending above current levels. Well, that's it. If you want to have independence from America, you have to have 5%, 6% GDP on defense. Calling Australia workers' paradise, genius. Albanese said that Australia could choose the way we engage with our region and deal with the world. While the US alliance was framed as a pillar of our foreign policy and our most important defense and security partnership, the speech appeared to infer a growing divide between Canberra and Washington. Senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, John Lee, said that Albanese calling for a more independent foreign policy would be understandable and credible if we are prepared to spend more to meet our defense needs rather than rely as much on American capacity, technology, and presence as we currently do. It does not appear that the Albanese government is prepared to do that. Therefore, if Albanese is really serious about strategic divergence away from the US, this will leave Australia more isolated and vulnerable. That's the thing. If you want to be independent of America, you have to have 5-6% of GDP on defense spending. Lenny says this: the address closely watched in Washington, my ass. We are very well regarded in the US as a very useful and loyal ally, regardless of who's in office. The Americans want us to spend more, and we will. I hope Lenny's right. I hope you're right on that. Greg Sheridan, with friends like us, who needs AUKUS? Anthony Albanese about to embark on an extended trip to China, where he will have his fourth meeting with President Xi Jinping. By contrast, he has never met Donald Trump. With friends like us, who needs AUKUS? Albanese has achieved something astonishing for an Australian Prime Minister only ever accomplished once before. He now knows, relates to, and benefits from the leadership of the People's Republic of China much better than he knows the leadership of the United States of America. The Prime Minister is about to embark on an extended trip to China where he will have his fourth meeting with President Xi Jinping. By contrast, he has never met Donald Trump, who served as president for 4 years from 2016 and who was elected president again more than 8 months ago. Albanese finds political comfort in Beijing and apparently political terror in Washington. Stop and stare at the strangeness of this reversal of all common sense in history. The last time this seemingly impossible inversion occurred was when Gough Whitlam, who very nearly destroyed the US alliance, was prime minister in the early 1970s. Whitlam was big in Beijing, detested in Washington. I've actually never seen this photo of Whitlam before with Mao Zedong. Beautiful. Chairman Mao Zedong meets with Prime Minister Gough Whitlam at Changnan High in Peking in 1973. Beautiful. If you want to be free of the military-industrial complex, you need to have a military-industrial complex. Max, if you just want to have Australia spend 1% of GDP on defense, then you are literally advocating for Australia to be annexed or rendered a satellite state of China. Seriously. The US is our closest strategic ally in war and peace, in love and thunder, in values and interests, in life and death. It saved our independence and sovereignty in World War II. All our military capability depends on it. The PRC, on the other hand, is ruled by the Leninist Chinese Communist Party. In the PRC, there are no human rights, elections, religious or civic freedom. There is a legal occupation of islands in the South China Sea. Australians periodically taken hostage. Frequent hostile and dangerous interaction with Australian military ships and planes. Yet Beijing provides political comfort to Albanese. Washington perplexity at best. Politics here reverses reality. These days, Albanese won't utter any criticism of Beijing, even when its actions are illegal or hurt Australia. Yet he's happy to tell the Trump administration to mind its own business on Australia's woeful defence budget, though this directly impacts alliance capabilities. Albanese ran in part against Trump, tying Peter Dutton to Trump. His senior ministers routinely criticised Trump policies. Perhaps without even realising fully what it's doing, when you take all its actions together, the Albanese government may be fatally undermining the long-term viability of our US alliance. If that's so, it will be the single bleak achievement for which history remembers the Albanese government. Canberra is telling everyone it's trying to organise a meeting between Albanese and Trump. Albanese talks of getting together with Trump in the margins of a big international meeting, a Quad, G20 or APEC summit, maybe the UN General Assembly meeting in New York in September. When it looked as though Albanese would meet Trump on the sidelines of the G7 meeting in Canada, senior government figures were glad it would be that kind of meeting, short, informal, unlikely to involve a joint media appearance rather than a dedicated one-on-one in the Oval Office. So here's an acutely important question. Is Albanese now seeking or dodging a meeting in the White House? Either answer is disturbing, for no meeting is forthcoming. If Albanese is actively seeking a Washington appointment that's being put off by Trump, that's a startling and unique moment in Australian history. Richard Nixon and Whitlam loathed each other, but Nixon saw Whitlam. If Albanese wants to go to the White House and Trump won't receive him, that's a revolutionary loss of influence and access for Australia. Shush, doggy. Trump is undoubtedly challenging to work with, but this nonetheless indicates hopeless management by the Albanese government. But perhaps Albanese... Doggy, shush! Sorry, doggy. But perhaps Albanese doesn't want to see Trump at the White House and is asking for a meeting only on the sidelines of some summit. Shush. It's okay. Shush. 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 Foreign Minister Penny Wong recently raised the vexed meeting question with US Secretary of State Mark Rubio at the Quad Foreign Ministers Gathering. She reports Rubio expressing regret Trump had to cancel the appointment with Albanese at the G7 in Canada. Shush, doggy. Trump had to go back to Washington to handle Iran. Notably, Trump rang the Indian Prime Minister and the Mexican President to apologize for cancelling their meetings. He didn't ring Albanese. If Albanese is scared to go to the White House, the contrast with his view of Beijing is striking. Albanese is about to embark on an extended trip to the PRC. What would Albanese have to fear in an Oval Office meeting with Trump? Of course, Trump is mercurial and unpredictable. After the way Trump humiliated Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky, some leaders are scared of getting monstered by Trump. Yet look at the White House success Britain's Keir Starmer had. Starmer not only managed the personal dynamics with Trump well, he raised Britain's defence spending to 2.5% of GDP this year, committed to 3% in the short term and 3.5% within a decade. Australia's stagnant defence spend of just a tiny tick over 2% of GDP is manifestly inadequate. I agree with that. Insofar as Trump ever thinks of Australia, it's positive. He has Australian friends such as Greg Norman and projects onto Australia a personality of rugged good cheer, sports prowess, and can-do, pragmatic, sun-worshipping, hedonistic, patriotic, MAGA down under types. Australia is popular in the US, especially in Congress. It's unlikely Trump would set out intending to monster Albanese. But Albanese may well fear Trump pushing him into some kind of commitment, something on the defense budget, maybe some remark about China. The first question Trump would be asked in a press conference is about Australia's defence spending. If Albanese is delighted to go to Beijing, the Great Hall of the People, the Zhongnan High Leadership Compound, and the Forbidden City, but is effectively trying to dodge going to the Oval Office, there's something very strange going on. Former Prime Minister John Howard thinks Albanese has comprehensively mishandled the US relationships since Trump became president. Howard tells Inquirer, I think Albanese, has managed the optics of the association with Trump very badly, and you can't separate this from the optics of the relationship with America generally. He's allowed this to get out of hand. There's really no substitute for the Prime Minister going to see the president in Washington. Perhaps Albanese should have gone to see Trump shortly after the president's election, even before his inauguration. He should certainly have made clear his desire to make a bilateral visit to Washington. By trying to precisely engineer the circumstances of his first meeting with Trump, Albanese has been too clever by half in Howard's view. Howard says he's allowed sensitivity over whether he could get a deal on tariffs to take over from the need to meet Trump. Howard's point is that however annoying tariffs might be, the US-Australia alliance needs long-term affirmation and management at the top. how it believes Labor's unexpectedly large election win is leading Albanese into a false sense of superiority, causing him to seriously miscalculate on issues related to both the US and China. They, the government, run the risk of damaging the national interest on China. They're just paralyzed into silence. Many observers are struck by Albanese's silence over Beijing's strategic behavior. Defense Minister Richard Marles, especially when speaking overseas in the presence of senior Americans, will very occasionally gently call Beijing out. But Albanese, Wong, and most senior ministers won't say boo. The PRC's Navy conducted live fire exercises in the Tasman Sea without giving it Canberra notice and disrupted Australia and New Zealand flights. It then circumnavigated Australia. Albanese's reaction was to stress that Beijing was behaving legally, and Australia did the same thing to China when our Navy sailed through the South China Sea. This was wrong on the facts, as Australia doesn't recognise PRC sovereignty over the islands Beijing has occupied or built in the South China Sea, but the cringing tone was the most telling part. Chinese ambassador to Australia, Xiao Chan, wrote an op-ed for The Australian in which he instructed the Albanese government not to increase its defence spending as the US has requested. This was blatant interference in Australian politics. Yet, the only displeasure Albanese expressed was directed at the journalist who had the bad manners to ask him about the ambassador's behaviour. Will the Australian ambassador in Beijing now write an article calling on the PRC to reduce its massive defence spending? Mike Pizzulu, former head of the Home Affairs Department, and before that, a Deputy Secretary in Defence, believes that the government's strange silences on Beijing damage Australia. He tells Inquirer, the Australian government's clear preference is to principally speak about China in bilateral terms, the stabilisation policy narrative. China also prefers this approach. This means there's no official discussion of regional security in concrete terms in relation to questions such as what is the risk of conflict, say, over Taiwan? Does Australia agree with the US strategy of deterring China from using military force? Does Australia wish to see the US remain as the regionally dominant military power? Would conflict with China inevitably draw Australia in, given the presence here of US facilities, joint and otherwise? Pizzulu continues, the silence over these questions undermines our democracy, as the public is more resilient on government pronouncements in the field of defense and strategy than it is in any other area of public policy. The Trump administration has made clear Australia's pitiful defence spend of 2% of GDP, the same percentage as when Albanese first came to government, is inadequate and constitutes free riding by a US ally. The US provides 99% of Australian security. Australia provides perhaps 1% of US security. The US spends about 3.5% of its GDP on defence. Without the US, we are effectively defenceless. Without us, the US is still overwhelmingly strong. US Undersecretary of Defense for Policy Albert Colby is reviewing AUKUS to see whether it fits with Trump's policies overall. Colby has been an AUKUS skeptic, thinking the idea of the US selling Australia 3 Virginia-class nuclear-powered submarines in the 2030s, when the US will desperately need those subs to balance Beijing's burgeoning forces, is unrealistic. Recently, Colby had a meeting with a senior Australian defense official that went very poorly. Analysts have speculated Colby's inquiry may be a way of Washington applying pressure on Australia to increase defense spending. There's another way of looking at it. Why would Washington give up 3 of its nuclear submarines to an ally that manifestly doesn't take its own military capability seriously? Albanese declares he won't increase defense spending to please the US. It's extraordinarily damaging to Australia's national interest for Albanese to frame the issue that way, when everyone whom the Albanese government has commissioned to guide it on defense policy has publicly said Australia needs to spend at least 3% of GDP. Albanese, Miles, and Wong all say Australia won't commit to a particular percentage of GDP, but will assess what capabilities it needs and require these. Leave aside the dishonesty inherent in the fact the Albanese government has routinely itself spoken in GDP percentage terms. The Albanese government did commission a report, the Defence Strategic Review, to identify necessary capabilities. Yet at no stage has the Albanese government pursued the capabilities the DSR said were essential. The DSR called for ground-based missile interceptor to provide missile defence for key Australian bases and other potential targets. It called for asymmetric drone capabilities. More prosaically, it called for Navy supply ships so our Navy could operate further from shore, and for demining ships. The Albanese government has shelved all these capabilities. Further, as the Australian National Audit Officer made clear in a scathing report this week, it has become so penny-pinching it can't even provide sustained performance and reliable availability for simple vessels such as the Navy's landing helicopter docks, our biggest ships. It's tempting to attribute all this to simple incompetence and a level of political cowardice involved in being unwilling to divert any social spending to defence. But there's another interpretation consistent with the facts. Albanese may not have his heart in acquiring nuclear-powered submarines at all. By providing such an absurdly inadequate defence budget, Albanese makes it harder for Australia's friends in Washington to justify AUKUS. If the Trump administration ultimately says to Canberra, you need to significantly lift your defence effort or we can't justify selling you nuclear subs, the Albanese government may well decide it can live without the subs after all and present the decision as sticking up for Australian sovereignty. Politically, Albanese and co don't want to be the government that lost the US alliance. They apparently believe the US so values access to Northern Australia that there are no circumstances in which it would abandon the alliance. However, that's an incredibly dangerous and in this way, basically transactional view of the alliance. You Americans need access to our northern airfields and Indian Ocean naval bases. So in giving you that, we've reached the limit of our contribution to the alliance. Wong is the strongest intellect in the government. In her speeches on the region, she has a formulation that Australia seeks a region in which no one dominates and no one feels dominated. This is taken as opposing Chinese domination. It's also a formulation that opposes US dominance. But for the past 80 years, Australia has desperately wanted US strategic leadership, indeed dominance in Asia. Wong talks frequently of ASEAN centrality. Almost no one who says that, including most Southeast Asians, actually means it, but perhaps Wong does. Australian officials have been known to say Australian policy should look more like ASEAN policy. That's a disaster. ASEAN policy is a disaster. This line of thinking actually goes back to Donald Horne and his 1964 book, The Lucky Country, and finds many echoes down the years in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. The idea is that Australia might keep the US alliance as an antique ornament on the mantelpiece, but really become effectively quasi-neutral, accepting that China will dominate the region eventually. If there's a conflict between the US and China, in this view, Australia just rides it out. This approach is not only dangerous and immoral, but wildly unrealistic. In one very strange speech in London in 2023, Wong explained foreign policy in Asia as a species of identity politics. The Albanese government is the first Labour government since Whitlam's, dominated by the left. Whitlam's disastrous government was so poorly regarded that not only the US, but also for a time, Britain and Canada cut off intelligence cooperation with Canberra while Whitlam was Prime Minister. Albanese and Wong both grew up entirely in the left. Initially, the student activists far left. It was a modern counterpart of the far left ideologues who dominated and destroyed the Whitlam government. Of course, both Albanese and Wong have matured and cast off their old views. But if you grow up in the left, you're never attuned to thinking seriously about national security. It's not part of the left's intellectual DNA. That is true. Labour's leaders who grew up in the party's right, like Kim Beazley and Bill Shorten, pondered national security all their lives. Bob Hawke, Labour's greatest post-war Prime Minister, had been on the left, but made a complete conversion to the right. His Defence Minister Beazley and Foreign Minister Gareth Evans were in the right. The contemporary left view of international affairs is to see it as a battleground of identity politics. The US's toxic masculinity representing white racial hegemony and neocolonialism. Israel even more so. Only rejection of all this and a third world gender-focused anti-colonial mindset is good. This is actually I actually think that is what they think. It would be wrong to think that the Albanese government subscribes fully to this type of formulation, but it's consistent with its weird strategic silence on China, fear of Washington, refusal to take defense seriously, cliches about ASEAN, and instinctive multilateral woolliness. Especially on China, this marks a disastrous evolution away from its declaratory positions in its first year in office. Justin Bassey, head of the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, thinks the US alliance will survive, but the new situation is full of political danger. He believes our geography makes us important to the US, even if our defense effort is feeble, but it's dangerous to let this breed complacency. He says it's not going unnoticed that Australia is willing to be more critical of our strategic ally than our strategic rival. The principle of cooperate where you can and disagree where you must is in China's interest, not ours, because the must shrinks to almost nothing. Australia should not be limited to criticizing our friends because they won't punish us. If we continue to avoid criticizing countries that might coerce us, that's coercion in ourselves. That's in itself. That's true. Historian of China John Fitzgerald argues similarly that we've gone silent on China while we feel at liberty to criticize Washington. Labour may have imposed another wicked constraint on itself and on Australia. Labour has ruthlessly convinced ethnic Chinese Australians that any criticism of the Beijing government by the Liberals or Nationals is a criticism of them. During the last campaign, Liberal frontbencher Jane Hume made a shockingly stupid comment about Chinese spies being part of Labour's campaign. This was unspeakably dumb and deserved to be punished. Wong, however, immediately made a WeChat video accusing the coalition of targeting ethnic Chinese. This video received 500,000 views. Fitzgerald comments on the video. Senator Wong's response was cynical, playing on sensitive community issues for political gain and damaging public trust. The gobsmacking lack of urgency with which the whole Albanese government now approaches defence and national security could be attributed to incompetence, poor management, laziness, hubris, provincial myopia, domestic obsession. Frankly, those are the benign interpretations, for if it's instead the result of considered strategy, our nation is in much more trouble than it realizes. I actually agree with almost every single line of that argument. I almost agree with literally everything in that article. That was a great article. There's no threat that justifies spending 5% on military. Are you kidding? Literally, the regional hegemon China is embarking on the greatest peacetime military buildup in human history, the history of the human species, and you're just relax about it. The only people threatening the world right now is Israel, US, and Russia. That's deluded, Max. That's deluded. Landy says this. What is the obsession with meeting President Trump? The 10% tariff is going to say it's like a de facto US federal sales tax Trump has put on every import. I don't like it, but it's staying. That's true. He's doing it on everything. Plastic Pinocchio says, I appreciate what you do and your unrelenting defense of everything the West stands for. Thank you. I love the West. I want the West to survive. I want the West to exist. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's great. That's a really nice comment. Thank you. Australia's defense budget is insane. It's larger than France that has nuclear weapons and fights in the Sahel. Australia only really does specific naval stuff at best, and I'm being generous here. That's not true. We don't spend more than France. No way. France defense spending. That's just a straight up lie. That's literally a straight up lie. France spends 65 billion US dollars on defense. We spend $33.8 billion on defense. As a share of GDP, it's 1.9% for us. France spends 2.1% of GDP. So on no metric is our budget bigger than France when it comes to military. That's just a lie. That's a straight up lie. If I wanted to read Greg Sheridan, I'd read Greg Sheridan. Wouldn't even need a metrosexual Greek to read it. To me, that's a funny comment. I agree. Where's that meme with Zelensky and Starmer caption? My people are poor, desperate, and hungry. And on the second panel, Zelensky replies, "I'm sorry to hear that, Mr. Starmer." That's grim. Mike Pizzullo is a great Australian. I'm actually going to try and get him on the Drew Pavler show. I'm going to try and get Mike Pizzullo on the Drew Pavler show. Very important. We should get that. Let's make that happen. Let's make that happen. Drew, would you support a Labour led by Raf Ciccone? I'm not sure about that. I would want it to be someone from Labour right who is pro-America and pro-West. Wong should be censored for that WeChat video if the article represented the events accurately. Let me try find that. Penny Wong WeChat video. Ah, beautiful. Beautiful. How beautiful is that? During the Australian election campaign, I want to make clear. Jane Hume's comment was literally brain dead retarded. It was literally so fucking stupid that she should be expelled from the coalition. It was so bad. It was the worst comment I've ever seen. But this is actually terrible. WeChat is a campaign. WeChat is a platform completely controlled. The entire information flow is controlled by the Chinese government, and Penny Wong is campaigning on their platform. That's the disgrace. That's a disgrace. That's an absolute disgrace. That is so bad. WeChat is a Chinese government controlled platform. That's like basically going to Chinese state media and campaigning through Chinese state media. That is such a disgrace by Penny Wong. Max says the Liberal candidates campaign on WeChat too. Yeah, and that's bad as well. The whole thing is bad. No Australian political candidate should ever campaign on WeChat, considering it's a Chinese government-controlled platform. Why the fuck is a single Australian politician campaigning on WeChat, which is a platform run and controlled by the Chinese government? That's fucking mental. That's fucking insane. What is happening to my country? What a fucking disgrace. Dr. Yang stated that while China's internet controls could influence platform content and account, their research suggested that the real impact on Chinese Australian voters was not stemming from foreign interference. Some accounts are based in China and operated by immigration or education agencies. They discuss Australian policies, but the content is commercial. They tend to post about immigration policies, foreign property ownership, etc., to stir anxiety and monetize the traffic. These subtle, complex issues are often so oversimplified as so-called foreign interference. That is such a disgrace and such a disaster for Australia. And then Suzanne Lay, Chinese Australian community. Suzanne Lay said Liberals didn't get it right with Chinese community during federal election. Suzanne Lay has moved to reassure the Chinese community after the Liberal Party failed to win or retain any seats with a high Chinese Australian population, with the opposition leader admitting the party didn't get everything right in the last election. Following a meeting with Chinese community leaders in Nepping in Sydney's northwest on Monday, Mrs. Lay said conversations were frank and it was clear the party needed to course correct. But here's the question: who are these community leaders and who appointed them? Hello, Steve. How are you? While she would not disclose private discussions with community leaders, she said the Liberals would continue the dialogue with community members. I think the message was well received, but I also know that the Chinese Australian community expects ongoing dialogue from this point forward. So then we're focused on the future and we're focused on what happens next, and they're focused on their families and their communities and their economic circumstances, just as all Australians are. Amazing. Beautiful stuff, isn't it? I want to find that article where Xiao Chen, the Chinese ambassador, tells Australia not to increase defense spending. Oh, it's all so tiresome. It's all so fucking tiresome. Chinese ambassador Xiao Chen publishes an article on Australian emphasis. Chinese ambassador Xiao Chen publishes an article emphasizing that Australia must not raise defense spending. It's also tiresome. This is foreign interference in Australian politics. Get the fuck out of my country. Oh my God, it's so fucking tiresome. Drew, why do you oppose a free trade deal between Australia and China? You're a Maoist, so fuck off. Just fuck off. Fuck off. If you're a communist, fuck off. Just the local fucking overlord from China telling us what to do in our own country. The Chinese ambassador saying, you cannot raise defense spending. Fuck off. Isn't it so funny? Albanese goes out and he makes out like America is imposing itself on Australian sovereignty by asking Australia to raise defense spending. But does he say a single thing when China imposes itself on Australian sovereignty and tells Australia, instructs Australia through the Chinese ambassador, whether or not to increase defense spending? when Trump talks about Australian defense spending, oh my God, such an attack on our Australian sovereignty. Then the Chinese ambassador comes in and says, do not dare to raise defense spending. And at that point, Albanese is just silent. You can't even comment about it. So fucking disgraceful and sad. Fucking so concerned for the future of this country. So fucking worried. All right, guys, I'm going to call it a day today. It's just a shorter stream today. Wait, why doesn't China want Australia to militarize? Does Xi Jinping genuinely see Australia as a threat, or is he just insane? They just want Australia to be a compliant pet. That's what they want. They want Australia to be weak. They want Australia to be completely weak. That's why they don't want us to lift defense spending. The difference being China does not choke Australia with tariffs when they do not get what they want. You are a fucking liar. China put dozens of billions of dollars of sanctions on Australia just 3 years ago. Stop these fucking lies. Stop this rewriting of history. China put dozens of billions of dollars of sanctions on Australian trade because we dared to call for an independent investigation into COVID. Oh, wow. Only America suffocates Australia with tariffs. China put trade tariffs on us for fucking years. Disgraceful. Maoist propagandist liar. The Australia-China trade war. I've got a comment. There's a comment by a Maoist in my chat. The difference between China and America is that America does not choke Australia with Australian Maoist, literally a Maoist from Australia, comes into my chat. The difference between China and America is that China does not choke Australia with tariffs when they do not get what they want. Go to Wikipedia, Australia-China trade war. For fuck's sake. Just the lies. Oh my God, 80% tariff on barley, blacklisting abattoirs, 206% tariff on Australian wine, 40% tariff on Australian cotton, unofficial ban on lobster, unofficial ban on Australian timber. Literally like $30 billion worth of Australian trade was destroyed. Do you remember there was actually a point where there was actually a point where Chinese cities were going cold. People didn't have heating because they refused to load Australian coal at Chinese ports. So they let the Australian coal sit off Chinese ports while Chinese cities went dark and went cold. That's how mentally insane this regime was in trying to punish Australia. And then this retarded Maoist in my chat. The difference between China and America is that China does not choke Australia with tariffs when they do not get what they want. Fuck you, liar. Fucking liar. Fuck you. Australia, China, coal, blackouts. AI overview. In late 2020, China experienced widespread power outages and blackouts, partly due to a significant reduction in Australian coal imports, which were unofficially banned amid escalating trade sanctions. Trade sanctions. More than 50 Australian coal ships remain stranded off China's coast despite power blackouts. Some 53 vessels have been waiting offshore for more than 4 weeks, while coal ships from other countries have delivered their loads. It's amazing. China literally had blackouts. Their cities were freezing in the winter, and they refused to load on Australian coal because they wanted to punish the Australian government. We had a 6-year trade war with China. What the fuck are people thinking? The difference between China and America is that China never places economic pressure on Australia. 6-year trade war, for fuck's sake. My number one target for deportation in Australia would be Wissam Haddad. He's the ISIS hate preacher in West Sydney. Number one target for deportation in Australia. Drew, China laid out 14 legitimate grievances against the Morrison government. The sanctions they issued was because Australia was piggybacking off the anti-Chinese racism as America was spouting during COVID. Amazing. China gave us 14 demands. They basically said, dissolve your country, dissolve your military, let us rape you. That was the fucking 14 demands. The Chinese Communist Party's 14 demands against Australia. Dissolve your military, dissolve your state, dissolve your parliament, let us rape you, let us kill anyone we want in Australia, let us fucking abduct and kidnap Australian journalists we don't like and put them into hostage situations. Fuck you. Literally fuck you. Didn't America Fauci deny and continue to deny the lab leak theory for years? Yeah, literally. Fucking mental cases. Oh, it's all so tiresome. It's all so fucking tiresome. Oh my God. There's some fucking a new communist article in the Sydney Morning Herald. Fuck off. It's all so tiresome. Fucking hell. Trying to get this Sydney Morning Herald article up. Australia needs a new China strategy. America's promised pivot to Asia is unlikely. Stuart Rollo. More communism. It's also fucking tiresome. Fuck off. Why does everybody want us to be fucking raped and killed and they want to destroy the West? I'm so fucking sick of this. Fuck off. The Trump administration retained a supposedly ironclad commitment to abandon the neoconservative model of foreign intervention and begin to focus squarely on the challenges posed by raising China. Trump's consistent stated opposition to these wars was one of the most popular ingredients in his early political success. Arguably the most critical moment in Trump's nascent election campaign occurred a week before the 2016 South Carolina primary, when he decried the Iraq War as a big fat mistake. Several of the most senior members of the Trump administration have built their political careers on similar stated values. Tulsi Gabbard, Elbridge Colby, J.D. Vance. Colby recently authored a sophisticated book outlining a strategy for denying China hegemony in Asia, wherein he explicitly identifies America's commitment to forever wars in the Middle East as a factor that will weaken the US position in Asia. Elbridge Colby, the guy who's currently denying missile transfers to Ukraine that would allow them to simply defend their own cities from constant Russian carpet bombing and bombardment. Exactly as full circle history said it. I've never called for nuclear war. I just oppose Russia and China invading and raping other nations. No, China would never. This is a great comment by Matt Cole. No, China would never place economic sanctions on Australia for political purposes, except when they did it for the politics I like, which is good. Yeah. Drew is our last stand of implicit Western identity. Fucking hell. This is basically just an article complaining about, the Middle East and Iran and Israel, blah, blah, blah. Therefore, that's why Australia should allow China to rape it. Fuck off. The United States' ongoing commitment to Middle Eastern interventionism is a reminder that we must develop our foreign and security policy around our own national interests and capabilities, not simply rely on a distant, distracted, and declining superpower. Fuck you, communist scum. Fucking hell. So sick of it. So fucking sick of the communism. So fucking sick of it all. Someone says, Drew, give me one legitimate reason to worry about China, other than the fact that they're not white. It's nothing to do with race. Listen, these people put people they hate in concentration camps. If you want them to run the world, then good luck to you. You're a fucking moron. You're actually suicidal. If you are right wing and you want a communist Leninist state to run the world, because oh wow, at least they don't have drag queens, you are literally a suicidal idiot. You're literally as suicidal as self-hating white leftists. This is Stuart Rollo's Twitter. I remember he had all this anti-America stuff back in the day. The end of the American Empire. Oh my God, for fuck's sake. It's all so fucking tiresome. This guy's some Trotskyist at the University of Sydney. Fucking kill myself. He's attacking he attacks Misha. Neoliberalism repackages undercooked technocratic utopianism. Support founded tax reform, hypergrowth cities. Sounds like Neo. Miserable Trotskyist. I'll have to read his book. I'll have to read his book. I'm gonna pirate it because I don't want to give him money. Academic is a communist who hates the West. More news at 6. Fucking hell. Just constant. It's always, always, always constant. You know where I saw this guy? I saw him do a podcast with fucking... So fucking weird, Spanian. What the fuck? Why was he on Spanian?
I think this is...
Like, why the fuck was this guy on Spanian? I don't know why the fuck Spanian had this guy on. It's the right...
Probably the single biggest beat-up area of all of the media discourse around, like, the threat of China to Australia. This actually shocked me when I was doing research.
He's a communist. He's a fucking communist.
So China is the 8th biggest investor into Australia. It has, I think, about $70 billion invested here. It's behind Luxembourg, it's behind Singapore, it's behind Belgium.
Probably a lot of the theories when people look completely different. Like you just look completely different. You know what I mean? And realistically, like let's be real. Whether it's a good thing or not, that's how the human brain works. When you see people buying all your stuff and they look nothing like you, then you're like, bro, what's going on?
Yeah.
Hey boys, before we get started, ladies and gentlemen,
I like
today's episode sponsored by Manscaped.
I like Spanian, but Stuart Rollo is a communist. I don't know why he had a communist on his show.
All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Search. Listen, Today we're going to talk about a very interesting and relevant topic of China. Our guest is a writer and researcher focusing on world history, geopolitics, and an expert on US-China relations. He's written regularly in international affairs, politics, and cultural issues at the ABC, the Sydney Morning Herald, including covering the US nuclear build-up in the New York Times. He's currently a postdoctoral research fellow at the Centre for International Security Studies at the University of Sydney. Dr. Stuart Rollo, welcome to the search.
Hey, man.
Brother?
I'm good.
What a bunch of mouthfuls.
I know, that was very impressive.
Only one slide. What about that? Hey, how are you? You good?
Yeah, I'm really good.
I'm excited for this, right? Let's go straight off the bat. The rise of China. Where does it start and why is it so important?
I think it's important because it's this is a really epochal moment in world history. So for probably the last 400 or 500 years, there's been an ebb and flow of empires, and they've all been European. So sort of speaking, the last 70 or so years, there's been an American empire. The United States became the most powerful country in the world after World War II, and it basically designed the whole international system that has dictated terms of economics, politics, military affairs, this kind of thing. And China is the first non-European country since probably going back to the Ottoman Empire that has been that is going to come to be a really influential shaper of world affairs.
And also, a superpower now is completely different to a superpower of 500 years ago.
Yeah. Or if you rule, the digital communication system, if you have great influence over the internet, you completely set the terms by which everyone comes to information and processes. It's way more powerful.
Even how you said that, even from what we know, look straight into it, right? From what we know of the way that China, how China are with that type of stuff, even in their own country, it's very different to the way we are.
It's pretty interesting, man. I don't know they're all this way that China sort of governs itself, as we said, is completely different. I suppose the fear that we have isn't so much about what they do. It's this idea that they're going to shape the world around that, and that's eventually going to be imposed on us. So yeah, I guess the the big question is, to what extent does the rest of the world, democratic countries, to what extent will they be in a position to counterbalance China or to have their own approach to these things? I think that a big thing about the rise of China is that we sort of conceptualize it as like, okay, well, America rules the world now, and so when China becomes the most powerful country or the biggest economy, they're going to rule the world in the same way America does. And I don't think that's true. I think like when America came,
when China rules the world, they'll just be benevolent, so nice to everybody, so they'll be so friendly.
to power at the end of World War II, it was under this completely
It's just bullshit because they literally did a kidnap plot against me in Australia. Literally, like the Australian Federal Police literally testified to the Australian Senate that there was a violent foreign intelligence plot by China against me here in Australia because I criticized them on Twitter. And this guy's just like, yeah, dude, it's so chill, bro. Yeah, Spaniard, bro, lad. Yeah, bro, it's gonna be fine. Fuck you.
Unprecedented set of circumstances. So, at the end of what every other major power is obliterated, or they're the Soviet Union. It's really, I suppose Britain wasn't obliterated, but it was just so much less important after World War II than before. So at the end of World War II, you have Europe decimated. Japan is a vassal of the United States.
Most of Asia is decimated.
Exactly, yeah. China loses 20 million people in World War II. So the US sits at the helm of creating this new world order, and it has half the world's economy, more than half the world's manufacturing power. I think like 70% of the world's gold reserves. It's the only country with a nuclear bomb, by far the biggest air force, the most developed, all this. And by far the biggest navy in the world. So it had this unprecedented disparity of power between it and everyone else. So it really could just do whatever it wanted, to a certain extent. I don't think that's the position China's in now, and I don't foresee it ever getting to that position outside of a really catastrophic war that
it just comes out as the last thing standing on.
Exactly. And that sort of world, it's just such a terrifying hypothetical. So I don't think that what we're going to be dealing with is that sort of China that's so powerful in the same way the US was, that it can dictate how everyone else uses the internet, what everyone else's political system is. Exactly. There is of course always a risk that like a powerful country is going to seek to reshape the world in ways that are favorable to itself. But I do think that
they want to do that though?
For the whole history of empires, they almost all, well maybe not almost all, but it's very common for them to say, we have no real imperial ambition. We are going to be a power that sort of breaks the cycle of empires and will bring equality. And so China's approach traditionally has been this sort of third worldist narrative. Is that there is this imperial core of Europe and North America, and we represent the third world, the other countries, the undeveloped world, and we're going to be a leader of that type of that sector of the international community and champion the sort of culture and approaches of that world. So I think China does. There certainly is like a principles of like what a Chinese order will look like, and the way they frame it now is actually very much around sovereignty. So because they're so obsessed with Taiwan, for example, and this idea that Taiwan is a part of China, they just say and because they commit various human rights abuses in their own country, their idea is like, well, you just have to respect the national sovereignty of everyone else. So if they actually were to stand by that, then that would imply that we don't have that much to worry about them shaping our internal affairs.
It's easy to say that.
Exactly. Yeah.
What country won't say that when they're not the biggest power? Exactly. You can't say it when you're not the biggest power. When you're second or third in the list, you can't really tell everyone that you're going to take them over. Yeah. You sort of have to play that card.
You'd think that. I mean, the US, since the United States declared the Monroe Doctrine in the 1820s, which is that so they said no European power is allowed to do anything in the Americas, or will take it as an act of aggression, and they justified this through this idea of American exceptionalism. So that because the old European empires are sort of authoritarian monarchies that repress their own people, we are a democracy and we're going to bring democratic values to the rest of the world.
It's the new world.
Yeah. So they said this at a time where they had no navy, a fraction of the economies of the European powers. So I do think
nothing in 1820 really.
Yeah. Well, they were on the rise, but it wasn't for
80 years until they became like the biggest industrial power. But America had this like very missionary ideology at the core of their empire building. It was very expansionist. It was this idea that we're going to reshape the world. We hold within us through our democratic institutions like a model of better governance for the world. I don't think China thinks that now. I'd be pretty surprised if even behind closed doors they were sort of planning, we need to create one party capitalist sort of state capitalist organs of power in every country to in the same way that the US sort of decided they were going to institute democracy everywhere. So I think A, they won't have the power to do that on anything like the same level as the US has had, and B, I don't think they're ideologically committed to reshaping the world in the same way that the United States was.
How do you say their power, their physical power? How do you say it? Like
Australia Mouse is such a joke because
on anything like the same level
China
as the US has had, and
China has border disputes with like 12 of its 15 neighbors. It's just such a joke. I like Spaniard. I think Spaniard's cool. I like Spaniard.
I can't access the internet. My banking, Apple Maps, nothing.
Oh, he went to Myanmar. That's pretty interesting. That's pretty interesting. Went to Auschwitz. Spaniard went to Mount Everest. That's cool, actually.
It is too dangerous, bro. It's too dangerous for me to be doing this by myself too. But I want to go back down the mountain right now, cuz I swear to God, I need to get out of here.
Mount Everest, the highest point on Earth, 8,848 meters up. People risk their lives for this mountain. They train for years, spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, leave their families behind just to touch the summit that could kill them before they even get there. I always wondered why. Like, what makes this place so special? Like, what is really up there that's worth all that sacrifice? I wasn't trying to climb it. I didn't care about that. I just wanted to see it with my own eyes and feel what they feel. So I had an idea. I flew all the way from Australia straight to Nepal and took the private chopper. No trek, no camp, no acclimatizing. Just want to get up there and find out what it's like. See it with my own eyes. I came here to see what Everest is really about. Our mission starts here in Kathmandu, the Soj.
Dude, these are good. These are well-produced videos. I'd love to make videos like this. Let's watch his Shenzhen video.
Any crimes that can't be solved in 24 hours.
No crimes that can't be solved in 24 hours because of how it's set up.
Now look at them. See them flashing? Bang. Look at them taking photos of every car. That's wild.
That's crazy how they do that. And how he was saying they photograph your face, your whole license check, seatbelt check, everything, cuz.
So I seen this city in China, Chongqing, going viral. Every YouTuber went and done their video there, and they were.
Why didn't you make a Ukraine vlog? I've got that coming. I've got that coming.
Painting it as the world's most advanced city or China's most technological.
You didn't even vlog. What are you talking about? Dude, I released like 6 vlogs. What did you see my Ukraine videos? I released Ukraine videos.
Logically advanced city. And don't get me wrong, the city looked interesting, but I didn't really see anything that advanced about it. A gas station on top of a roof, some colorful buildings. It wasn't quite what they were painting it to be, but I knew that China does have some very advanced cities, and they are actually leading the world in a lot of ways. So I reached out to a contact I had in China and asked, what is China's most technologically advanced city from a Chinese perspective? And he said, without a doubt, it's the tech hub of China. It's Shenzhen. Some cities feel alive. This one feels like it's watching you. Shenzhen, it's not in the future, it is the future. Drones in the sky, cars with no drivers, face and palm paying for everything. But if you look closer, there's a system running underneath it. Cameras on every corner, facial recognition on every street. You can't hide here, even if you wanted to. There's no crime because there's no way to get away with it. You move and the city moves with you. This isn't sci-fi. This isn't a test. This is what the world might look like in 10 years. But
this is a great video by Spaniard. Holy shit.
They're living it now. Welcome to Shenzhen, the world's most advanced city.
Like, welcome to Shenzhen. Now look at this. Straight off the bat, cuz.
Chris, these are the types of videos that I've got to make. Obviously can't go to China, but other videos, you know.
Straight in the hotel lobby. Haven't even got time to check in. And there's a robot. There's a robot that makes your coffee. There's a full robot that makes your coffee, lad. What's going on? Haven't even checked in yet. What's going on here? Hot coffee, robot latte art, 1,000-layer heart-pulling flower. Show me this. Show me this. I don't know what it says, but let's assume that's Alipay. Yes, it is.
I love this comment. Fuck yeah, can't wait to live out my cyberpunk fantasy and get a Robocock that is tracked by the government.
By the way, I'll tell you about the payment system in China. There's no money here. It's all apps and wireless, but we'll get to that. 28 yuan. Let's Oj, brother. Show me this robot latte art. 100.
Is the Tucker interview out? Is the Tucker interview on Iran out? Oh, it's out now. Fuck, I wanted to go to bed. Oh, should I watch it? Oh, I'll do it tomorrow, maybe. I think I'll watch the whole thing.
By the way, I'll tell you about the payment system in China. There's no money here. It's
Is he just soy-jacking because somebody linked up a coffee machine to a computer to the screen? Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, let's watch 2 minutes of the Tucker thing. Holy shit, it just came out. Damn, I wanted to go to bed. Fuck's sake.
Mr. President, thank you very much for doing this. There is a pause, or seems to be a pause, in the war between the United States and Iran. How do you think this will end? How would you like to see it end?
We did not start this war, and we do not want this war to continue in any way. From the very beginning, it was the motto of my administration that I always adhere to, and that was fostering the national unity inside the country and also fostering peace and tranquility and friendship with the neighboring countries and with the rest of the world.
The American President Donald Trump has said that the United States bombed your enrichment facilities because the government of Iran refused to give up its nuclear program, and that there can be no peace until Iran does give up that nuclear program. Would you be willing to give up the nuclear program in exchange for peace?
I would like to tell you what has happened, and it was Netanyahu since 1984 has created this false mentality that Iran seeks a nuclear bomb, and it has insinuated that Iran is trying to develop a nuclear
Yeah, the president has some authority in Iran, but the real ruler is the Ayatollah.
bomb in the past, and it has put it in the minds of every U.S. president since then.
The really big interview would be if he was interviewing the Ayatollah.
To make them believe that we would like to have a nuclear bomb. But the truth is that we have never been after developing a nuclear bomb, not in the past, not presently, or in the future, because this is wrong, and this is in contrast to the religious decree or the fatwa, which has been issued by His Eminence, the Supreme Leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran. So it is religiously forbidden for us to go after a nuclear bomb. And this was always corroborated thanks to our cooperation with IAEA, because they were always there to verify this and to substantiate that we have never wanted a nuclear bomb. But unfortunately, this cooperation was disturbed by the unlawful attacks against our nuclear facilities.
So you have, according to news reports, withdrawn your cooperation from IAEA, the International Nuclear Regulatory Agency. And so there's, I suppose, no way for the rest of the world to know how much uranium you're enriching and to what extent.
Lamayo, there's someone doing good Tsar, bad boyars, but with the Ayatollah.
What percentage is being enriched? And so is there any way to verify, and would you be willing to allow other nations to verify that you are not building nuclear weapons?
Mr. Carson, sir, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that we were right in the middle of holding talks with the United States. And the President of the United States invited us to hold such talks in order to have peace. And we were told during the process of these negotiations and talks that as long as we don't give the permission to Israel, they are not going to attack you. And we were going to have the next round of the talks very soon. But in the middle of it, suddenly Israel torpedoed the negotiating table. We were sitting at the negotiating table when it happened. And by doing this, they totally ruined and destroyed diplomacy. In order to answer your question with regards to the surveillance or the supervision over our nuclear program, I would like to say that we are ready to hold talks over it. We have never been the party that has run away from verification. We stand ready to have these supervisions. But unfortunately, as a result of the United States' unlawful attacks against our nuclear centers and installations, many of the pieces of equipment and the facilities there have been severely damaged. Therefore, we don't have any access to them. We cannot see. And unless this access is going to be back there again, we have to wait for it and to see what happens and how much they have been damaged so that we can go for the supervision.
There have been news reports that your government believes that the IAEA was spying on the government of Iran and passing information to Israel. Do you believe that? And if so, do you have evidence that that's true that the world could see?
And I would like to tell you that we were, somehow pessimistic about the activities of the IAEA because somehow we realized that Israel get information from the inspections which were carried out by the IAEA, but it never prevented the IAEA from carrying out their activities inside Iran, and they had full access to supervise and to have surveillance over our nuclear facilities. But there was this lack of trust as a result of the last report by IAEA. The type of the report and the way they prepared the report somehow gave an excuse to the Israeli regime and prepared the ground for their unlawful and unauthorized attack against our nuclear facilities. And even after that, the IAEA failed to condemn these attacks or try to stop them. And this ran counter to the international law. And this resulted in a widespread lack of trust among the Iranian legislators, and the public opinion here.
Massimo says this: true victory is in sight. Iran wrecked ripe for regime change. Russia deeply on the back foot as one of their major allies is defunct. China experiencing the major hangover from deflation, fertility rate. We'll see. I still think it's a very dark time for the West right now because I think there is such a massive crisis of legitimacy and demoralization in Western societies. Drew, when will you debate Zuma Schopenhauer? Sometime next week. I'm happy to debate him. It's on. I think you guys want me to debate him on degrowth. I don't know exactly what you want me to actually debate him on, but I'm happy to do it. Listen, guys, I've got to go because it's almost midnight here in Australia. I will be back streaming tomorrow for episode 77 of the Drew Pavlis Show. Thank you for tuning in. Remember to leave a like on the show. Remember to subscribe as well. Help us reach more people. And I appreciate everybody who's been tuning in. I want to say thank you to Plastic Pinocchio for the super chat and also Pickles LeBlanc. Thank you guys. Appreciate it. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Stay humble. The fortress of righteousness is rising. All right. See you guys. God bless you all. See you tomorrow.